everyone, so today I'm going to be reviewing the book Go Ask Alice by Anonymous, or so I thought. I really wanted to start doing more of these individualized book reviews, so hopefully I get to do a lot of them this summer. I'm just going to be sharing my thoughts, and I'm also going to be talking about the controversies surrounded with this book. So I'm going to start with the basic plot first. This book takes place in the late 1960s. I believe it was published in 1971, and basically the protagonist is a 15-year-old girl. I'm just going to refer to the protagonist as Alice because they mention it in the cover and also in the back cover. I know they don't mention it in the actual diary, but that's what I'm going to call her. So Alice basically records her thoughts on this diary, and she talks about high school issues that I think every teenager faces. Well, at first, she talks about crushes, she talks about weight loss, she talks about anxiety, social acceptance, and her parents as well. But yeah, after she then delves into the world of drugs when she takes LSD accidentally at a party. And then she just talks about her drug addiction throughout the rest of the book, and she runs away to different places, of course, and then she ends up at a mental institution. But yeah, that's like the basic premise of the story. So I read this book originally thinking it was an account from an actual 50-year-old girl. However, I was disappointed when I did some research and I discovered that it was written by Beatrice Sparks, which I'm going to talk about later. But anyways, throughout the book, I do feel like some things were a bit off. Like, for example, Alice's language was a bit too sophisticated for a 15-year-old girl. Not to mention, the tone was very drastic. In some parts, she felt like an actual teenager. Once again, I'm not really accustomed to 70s slang, but I felt like she was an actual teenager. But then also, there were some parts where her vocabulary was way too sophisticated and she sounded more like an adult. But then she also sounded like a child in some parts because she repeatedly used the word oh and God and oh my God, and I don't know, there were like aspects of the book that didn't really mash together, like also the fact that she went to mental hospital. I feel like that was very abrupt and sudden, and I don't know like in what sense it contributed to the overall story. And yeah, and also not to mention the epilogue was also very suspicious. I mean, it literally says that she died like 3 weeks after this diary ended, and once again it was super sudden and abrupt, and it just felt a bit assembled. So yeah, those are my thoughts on why I feel like this book was completely fictitious, but obviously after doing some research, I realized that it is actually fiction and not an actual diary. So this book has actually been marketed as nonfiction and fiction in some bookstores. However, I did notice that it continues to be marketed as an anonymous account, which obviously is not true after doing some investigation, but I feel like this is, once again, one of the most interesting aspects of the story. Like, the fact that it was supposed to be anonymous. That's what kind of drew me into it when I first saw it in my local bookstore. First of all, I was obviously intrigued by the cover, but also the anonymous. So also this book has apparently been one of the most controversial and very frequently challenged books for several decades, and I believe this is due to its profanity. I mean, it has pretty explicit references to sex as well, and obviously like drugs and homelessness. I feel like that resulted in the book's success. It was a combination from the anonymous, also the controversy surrounded to it, the intrigue in finding who the actual author is, and this didn't stop Beatrice Sparks from later creating more fraud diaries. Like, I know she wrote this one about Jesus' journal, loosely based on an actual journal. She also wrote Finding Kate, and also It Happened to Nancy. So once again, I was kind of disappointed to discover it was fake, but also I believe that Beatrice Sparks' publisher actually told her to publish under anonymous because it was going to be more controversial and also it was going to be more intriguing. I mean, it definitely worked for me, but I feel like this book raises greater concerns than its content. I mean, I went into this book thinking it was an actual diary, and to some extent I could connect to Alice, but once again, this is fake nonfiction, and this is not the first time we see this in the publishing industry. I feel like this book should raise more concerns about how it was marketed than the actual content it covers. So the title from Go Ask Alice, I believe, was taken from a line in Jefferson Airplanes' 1967 White Rabbit. In the lyrics, she mentions "Go ask Alice when she's 10 feet tall," and that lyrics actually references Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, published in 18. Reading Alice in Wonderland and then later hearing about the story, I know a lot of people actually say that Alice in Wonderland is a metaphor for drug addiction or for drug experience, and it kind of makes sense when you read about Alice's trip to Wonderland and also taking mushrooms and the difference in her size and also the caterpillar. And so I can understand why the protagonist is named Alice. After all, she does go down the rabbit hole and down a spiral of endless drug addiction. I did feel like the writing of this book was kind of bad, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, there were some plot holes to begin with. Also, it is very inconsistent, and as I mentioned, it's pretty abrupt and sudden in some parts. Overall, when you learn that Go Ask Alice isn't a diary from an actual girl, it really does take a lot from it, because the most secretive and personal possession from a person is a diary, and it kind of feels like a taboo when you try to explore the mind of a complete stranger that is delving into drug addiction. Overall, I thought the drug message was interesting, even if it was just Christian propaganda. Although I did hear some people saying that they didn't really mind the anti-drug message and they thought that the book glorified drugs. I didn't really think, I mean, that wasn't my take on it at least, but I did hear that some readers could find that experience some of Alice's rebellious behavior through this book. I feel like that's a much rather positive alternative than obviously trying drugs for yourself. So after all, I feel like it does have good educational content, and I'd recommend reading this book to honestly teenagers in general, especially pre-adolescents, even if the writing isn't that great. And fiction or not, after all, Alice was real, because Alice does, after all, represent the millions of teenagers who died because of drug addiction. That's it. Thank you for enjoying my book review. See you next time. Bye.